All right, so you've sent us a ton of stuff on Pi Network. Looks like you're really interested in figuring out this whole mine crypto on your phone thing. Honestly, I get it. I mean, the potential's huge, right? Global adoption, maybe, all the buzz about the future. It definitely feels like it could be the next big thing. But we need to be real about this, separate the hype from reality. So, are you ready to go deep on Pi Network? We're going to unpack what it is, where it stands right now, and yeah, what the future might hold for it.
Including all the risks, of course.
And it seems like a pretty important time to be looking into Pi. I mean, they're talking about moving towards an open mainnet launch soon. That brings up a ton of questions.
For sure, for sure. Feels like we're on the edge of something big here. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just start with the basics. For anyone who's just tuning in, what exactly is Pi Network anyway? Well, at its core, Pi Network's goal is to make it possible for anyone to mine cryptocurrency. So instead of needing these giant power-hungry computers, Pi lets you mine using just your phone. It's a pretty smart way to reach a ton of potential users, right? And it addresses some of the environmental concerns around traditional crypto mining.
Yeah, because let's be honest, not everyone can afford to have a mining rig in their basement, one that uses as much power as a small country. But I'm curious about the whole mobile mining thing. How does that even work? Is it actually decentralized? Or are there some compromises being made somewhere?
Yeah, that's where things get interesting. Pi Network actually uses something called the Stellar Consensus Protocol,
Hmm?
which is totally different from those energy-intensive proof-of-work systems, like Bitcoin and stuff use. This one lets them do transactions faster, and it uses way less energy, which makes it perfect for doing mining on your phone.
Okay, so it's efficient and it's accessible. But is it secure? I mean, if you're relying on smartphones to run your whole network, doesn't that create some vulnerabilities? Phones get lost, people can hack them.
Yeah, that's definitely a valid concern. To try and deal with that, Pi Network's got this whole multi-layered security system. So first off, they've got a pretty serious KYC process, basically making sure that users are really who they say they are. That way they can keep bots and fake accounts out. They're using a mix of machine learning algorithms and real people to check everything.
KYC on a decentralized network, that's got to be tricky. What about the mining itself? How do they make sure everything stays safe and legit when you've got millions of different devices all doing their own thing?
Well, they've basically divided users up into different roles within the network, that is.
Hmm.
Pioneers,
Hmm.
contributors,
Hmm.
ambassadors, and nodes. And each one of those contributes to the security and the overall agreement of the network in different ways. For example, the pioneers just check in every day to mine, while the nodes actually use their computer power to make sure transactions are good and keep the blockchain up and running.
So they're spreading the responsibility around, creating this whole web of trust thing. Interesting. What are the implications of that, though?
Well, there are definitely pros and cons to think about. On the one hand, it builds a sense of community. Like everyone's in this together, and everyone's got a responsibility to keep things running smoothly. So users are encouraged to participate, help the network grow, and keep it secure. But some people are worried that relying on individual devices,
Hmm.
especially phones, might actually lead to more centralization down the line, especially if you end up with a bunch of nodes that are all in the same place geographically or controlled by just a handful of people.
That makes sense. It's kind of a trade-off then between being easy to access and keeping things decentralized the way crypto is supposed to be. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about where Pi Network is right now. You mentioned this enclosed mainnet thing. What does that mean for someone who's actively mining Pi today?
Well, think of it kind of like a beta phase. It's running, but everything's happening within this closed-off space. Users can send Pi back and forth between each other, and they've even got this marketplace where you can buy and sell stuff using Pi.
So you're earning Pi, but you can't just cash out on an exchange like you could with Bitcoin or Ethereum.
That's right. And that makes it really tough to figure out what Pi is actually worth, since it's not listed on any of the big exchanges.
So it's like this mystery currency, loads of potential, but no real price tag attached. No wonder everyone's speculating. So how do they break out of this enclosed system? What's the plan?
Well, the Pi Core team has said that moving to an open mainnet, where Pi can be traded freely on exchanges, depends on two things: getting a whole lot of people KYC verified and making the ecosystem itself stronger. They think that if they have a big verified user base
Mhm.
and a really healthy internal economy, that'll make Pi way more appealing to exchanges and investors when it finally goes live.
So they're thinking long term, trying to build a strong foundation before they jump into the craziness of the crypto markets. But are there downsides to that approach? Could they be missing out on what's happening in crypto right now by waiting too long? And what's the timeline for this open mainnet launch?
Yeah, those are all really good questions, and that's exactly what we're going to get into next.
All right, so let's talk about the future. You're saying open mainnet exchanges investors. What does Pi Network actually need to do? Like, what do they have to achieve to make that transition happen? What kind of hurdles are they facing?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
They've got this roadmap laid out, but there are a lot of pieces that need to fall into place. One of the big ones is the whole KYC verification thing. They really need to make sure that a huge chunk of their users are actually verified to
Okay.
prevent fraud
Mm.
and, comply with all those regulations.
That sounds like a total logistical nightmare. Millions of users all over the world. How do you even begin to verify everyone's identity on that scale? Especially when you're trying to stay decentralized.
It's a massive undertaking for sure. They're trying to use a combination of automated systems
Yep.
and community verification. But there are definitely concerns about whether that can really scale. And there's always the potential for bias in those systems. Plus, KYC requirements are different everywhere you go. Every country's got its own rules. So navigating that whole legal mess is going to be super important.
So even if they get the whole KYC thing figured out, that doesn't automatically mean they're going to be successful, right? What about the ecosystem itself? We touched on the Pi marketplace a bit, but what else needs to happen to build that thriving internal economy they're talking about?
That's where the whole idea of utility comes in. For Pi to have any real value, people need to be able to use it for more than just buying and selling stuff within the network. They've got to get developers on board to build decentralized applications, dApps, that offer actual real-world utility.
dApps, for those of us who aren't, crypto wizards, what does that actually mean? Can you give us some examples?
Sure, think of dApps like regular apps. But instead of running on some company's server, they run on a blockchain, like Pi Network's blockchain. It could be anything, really. Financial tools, like decentralized exchanges, lending platforms, social media platforms, games, even stuff like supply chain management systems. Pretty much anything you can imagine.
So Pi needs to become this platform for innovation, a place where developers are excited to build stuff and users are excited to use it. But how do they actually make that happen? Are they just waiting for developers to show up, or are they actively trying to bring them in?
Well, they've created this software development kit, an SDK, to make it easier for developers to build dApps on Pi. They're also hosting hackathons and developer conferences to encourage people to build cool stuff and attract talent.
So they're setting the stage, giving people the tools, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the developers and the community to really embrace Pi and build something valuable. It's kind of like a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? You need users to attract developers, but you need developers to create the apps that will attract more users.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. And that brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle. Tokenomics.
Ah, yes. The mysterious world of tokenomics. Break it down for me. What do we actually know about Pi's token distribution model, and how could that affect its value down the line?
This is where that lack of transparency we talked about earlier starts to become a bit of a problem. The PiCore team hasn't really given us the full picture when it comes to things like the total supply of Pi, the way it's distributed, or how the mining rewards work. There's been some speculation, but nothing official.
That's a little concerning, right? How are investors, or even just regular users, supposed to make informed decisions about Pi without knowing those crucial details? It feels like they're asking us to take a bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah, it definitely raises some red flags. Some people think they're being intentionally vague to create hype and get people speculating. Others think they're still working out the details, and they'll release everything closer to the open mainnet launch. But without that information, it's impossible to say for sure whether Pi's tokenomics are sustainable in the long run.
Okay, so we've got KYC challenges, ecosystem development hurdles, and questions about tokenomics that haven't been answered yet. But let's change gears for a minute. You mentioned earlier that Pi Network has this strong community aspect. Tell me more about that. What's driving that sense of community, and how does it fit into Pi's overall strategy?
It's a really interesting phenomenon. It seems like Pi Network has tapped into this very basic human desire to be part of something new, something that could be groundbreaking. They've built this feeling of community through in-app chats, social media groups, even local meetups.
So it's more than just a crypto project. It's almost like a movement. People are drawn to the idea of being early adopters, like pioneers in this new decentralized world.
Exactly. And the team has definitely capitalized on that enthusiasm to get people involved. They've gamified the mining process so you can earn more Pi based on how much you contribute to the network and how big your referral network is.
So there's an incentive to not only mine Pi, but also to tell everyone about it. Build your team. and contribute to the community. It's a pretty clever way to grow organically. But is that sustainable over the long term? What happens when the novelty wears off? Are people going to stick around if the price of Pi doesn't immediately explode after the open mainnet launch?
That's the big question. Right now, a lot of the participation is driven by excitement and speculation.
Mm.
But whether that translates into long-term value and real-world utility, well, only time will tell.
Okay, so we've talked about the community, the potential hurdles Pi Network faces, and some of the big unknowns. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty for someone who's listening to this and trying to decide whether to jump on the Pi bandwagon. What are the key things they should keep in mind? What are the risks and what are the potential rewards? We'll dig into all of that when we come back for the final part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here. The tech, the community, all the potential upsides and the uncertainties with Pi Network. But let's take a step back for a sec. Look at the bigger picture. How does Pi Network fit into the whole world of cryptocurrency? What are they doing that's actually new? And what could this mean for the future of finance if they pull it off?
Yeah, Pi Network is definitely pushing the limits of what we thought was possible with crypto. Their whole focus on mobile mining and making it easy for anyone to join. It's bringing in people from all over the world, people who never would have been able to get involved in crypto before. It's like they're democratizing access to it. But how does their approach compare to other projects trying to do similar things? Are there other cryptocurrencies out there using mobile mining? Or is Pi really unique in that way?
Well, there are a few other projects experimenting with mobile mining, but Pi Network stands out because of its scale and how ambitious they are. They're not just trying to build a little niche community. They're aiming for mass adoption, like billions of users.
Wow, that's a pretty bold vision. But when you're talking about numbers that big, you're going to get a lot more scrutiny too, right? How are they addressing those concerns about security and decentralization, the ones that always come up when you're dealing with such a massive network?
Well, they're putting a lot of faith in their multi-layered security system, combining the KYC verification, the Stellar Consensus Protocol, and all those different roles people play in the network. It's all supposed to work together to minimize risk. But like any project this big, there are going to be trade-offs.
Right. And I bet those regulatory hurdles are a major concern too. Crypto's still relatively new. It's constantly evolving. Governments are still trying to figure out how to regulate it. So how is Pi Network navigating that whole mess?
Yeah, it's a constantly changing landscape. They've said that they're committed to complying with regulations, but it's hard to say exactly what that'll look like in practice. I think Pi Network's success is really going to hinge on whether they can adapt to all the new rules and build trust with both users and regulators.
So they're walking a tightrope here, trying to balance innovation with playing by the rules. It's a high-stakes game. But if they win, it could really change the future of finance. Let's bring it back down to earth for a minute, though. For someone listening to this who's maybe intrigued by Pi Network, but also a little hesitant, what advice would you give them? How can they decide whether or not to get involved?
I think the most important thing is to be a little skeptical and really do your own research. Don't just buy into the hype or believe everything you see on social media. Dig a little deeper.
Yeah, look past the headlines, get different perspectives, and make sure you understand both the risks and the potential rewards.
Exactly. And be realistic about what you're expecting. This isn't some scheme to get rich quick. The future of Pi Network is uncertain. There's a chance it could completely fail. But if you're curious about crypto and you're okay with the risks, mining Pi could be a fun experiment.
Yeah, it's a low-risk way to try it out. You're not putting any money in, just your time and attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe you'll end up being a part of something huge.
The very beginning of a whole new financial system. That's pretty exciting to think about. But even if Pi Network doesn't achieve everything they're hoping for, the journey itself could still be valuable.
Definitely. It's a chance to learn about blockchain technology, see how these community-driven projects work, and get involved in the world of crypto.
Well, there you have it, our deep dive into Pi Network. We've talked about how it works, the community behind it, the potential benefits, and the risks that come along with it. Ultimately, the decision of whether or not to participate is up to you.
But remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about Pi Network, the better decisions you can make, ones that align with your goals and your risk tolerance.
So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring the amazing world of cryptocurrency. Until next time, happy mining!